London is one of the biggest cities in Europe, 15 times larger than Paris. The Thames is the backbone of the UK capital, the line around which the city grew. London has a rich 1,000-year history. For a long time, the centre of an empire, it has always been respectful of its past. The city prides itself on the monuments that symbolise its greatness, diligently maintaining them and giving them pride of place. London has long been sensitive to the quality of its environment and the quality of its air. The famous pea super fogs haven't been seen since the 1950s, thanks to strict laws limiting the burning of coal. The city is now tackling CO2 emissions. For London, the protection of nature is more than just fine words. So, saddle up, everyone. Starting life during the Roman Empire, London has a disconcerting lack of architectural homogeneity. And the clash of styles can shock. But London is above all a state of mind. A sprawling city that manages to maintain a human scale. The city respects its traditions, even though they have become clichés. No real Londoner ever ventures out without an umbrella. London also fosters the memory of the more famous characters of every domain who have lived there. It has even found a novel way of reminding passers-by of their names. In London, past and present exist side by side. The codes of another age give the city its character. Modern London is a combination of refinement and luxury. Certain ceremonies still go off with pomp and elegance. Traditional values are preserved right into the shopping arcades. These elegant passageways are in many ways the capital's first shopping malls. Although restored and renovated, they've not become museum pieces. They remain very stylish stores. All kinds of British-style clothing and traditional accessories can be found there, for both town and leisure wear. Artistic values have their place in London. Art is regarded as one means of expression among many. Perhaps here, more than anywhere else, freedom of expression, any expression, is respected. Everyone is free to express themselves. There are two ways to make yourself heard. Either camp outside Parliament or organise a parade in the most basic apparel possible. London is tolerant in the broadest sense with regard to politics, religion and culture. It is a melting pot embracing every nationality. Some schools take in pupils from dozens of different countries. Does this cohabitation cause any problems? Primary school headmistress Jacqueline Steele explains.
Actually, it's quite the opposite. I think what the children grow up together from the age of 4 and 5 together in a very cosmopolitan, multicultural environment. They learn tolerance and mutual respect as part of their daily lives, and it's very important, I think, that children, we represent society for them, so I think it's advantageous.
London is multifaceted, a veritable mirror on the world on so many different levels. While preserving its past, London embraces diversity. And this is unquestionably where its strength lies. London has its icons, the buildings that make the city what it is. Trafalgar Square is one of them, home to the National Gallery filled with great masters. And Nelson's Column, a monument to the admiral who lost his life winning the Battle of Trafalgar. Buckingham Palace has been the seat of the royal family for over 200 years. The palace is still one of the Crown's main residences. and its colours fly at official ceremonies, just as they always have. Tower Bridge is a late 19th century technological triumph. During heavy river traffic, this road bridge used to open up 5 times a day to allow large ocean-going ships through. The old mechanism still works. A fort and former prison, the Tower of London is still home to the crown jewels. And Britain's largest clock, Big Ben, still rings out from above the Palace of Westminster, where Parliament is based. In London, the modern world rubs shoulders with the past. The capital, far from being constricted by its traditions, shows itself to be a city of the new millennium, with 21st century landmarks springing up everywhere. The London Eye was conceived to cast the city's gaze towards the future. At 135 meters high, the juxtaposition of monuments of the past and present is reflected by the mirror in the sky. London has celebrated the new millennium by giving itself a facelift. The London Eye is situated on the south bank of the Thames. The area has become a meeting place and venue for impromptu performances that even the very young can appreciate. The setting of Regent Street, one of the city's main shopping thoroughfares, is another of the capital's landmarks. It is a shrine to shopping, and shopping in London embraces all cultures. On this particular day, the street was teeming with a cosmopolitan crowd come to join in an Indian festival. No less than 300 languages are spoken in London. Religions of every conceivable type may be found here. Most minorities hail from former colonies. Indians alone account for 2% of the UK's population. Economic success, though, has attracted all manner of nationalities. This cosmopolitanism makes London a mirror of the planet. London was born on the banks of the Thames in a district that is now one of the world's leading financial centres. Stephen Senior is an architect and town planner.
Here is what in London is known as the Square Mile, where the most intensive pressure exists for future developments of architecture due to the financial sector being based in this area.
Despite its futuristic skyscrapers, the City Business District is one of London's oldest neighbourhoods, with a 2,000-year history.
The Square Mile was first settled by the Romans and has retained its medieval street plan up to the present day, which, when new buildings come forward, makes issues of view lines and historic buildings even more important, because we haven't got a grid pattern like, say, New York or other cities that are newer.
The imagination of architects has led to the construction of some rather unusual buildings.
Some of them are designed by English architects, others from architects from America, from the continent of Europe. Perhaps the most famous new building in the square mile is the Gherkin by Norman Foster. This was the first new high building in the centre of the city for some time, and led to a rash of applications coming in for other tall buildings, which can be seen on the model.
It isn't easy to show daring in an historical environment because of the countless rules that have to be respected.
Perhaps the most important building in the city is St. Paul's Cathedral, and it has been recognised as such. And buildings that are anywhere near St. Paul's have to be relatively low because the views of St. Paul's are protected in law.
The dome of St. Paul's will dominate the London skyline for a long time to come. The cathedral's colonnades match those of the nearby financial institutions, such as the Royal Stock Exchange and the Bank of England. This is the heart of the financial district. 300,000 people come to work here every day. The money men come from all four corners of the globe. And the city is a kaleidoscope of nationalities.
Lithuania.
Thailand.
Jordan. Norway.
I'm from Belgium.
London.
But why does London attract so many?
There's a lot of people here, there's a lot of energy in the city, and everyone's got a kind of can-do attitude.
It's not just about finance, it's about the vibe in this place.
London is right in the heart of Europe, but it's also culturally and linguistically close to the United States of America.
As far as Europe's concerned, London is the front runner.
Just makes lots of money and it's a great place to work.
Just probably most of the money of the world in here.
To get money.
And how did the city become such a major financial capital? Justin Dukes.
Well, from its start, which was fairly modest, it grew rapidly because of two accidents and, shall we say, two designs. The two accidents were, first of all, an accident of language. The common language around the world for finance happens to be English. And secondly, we are located in terms of our position on the globe in the right location. So we span both the East, Middle East, Far East, and also the Americas. And then secondly, the design in terms of having people of the right ability and expertise, and finally, crucially, integrity.
Not by accident was the city created on this spot.
People found it convenient because of the access to the port of London. They were merchants. Merchants wanted to deal with banks. The ships came from all over Europe, from Scandinavia, from Amsterdam, from Holland, Belgium and France. And at the end of the day, all of those forces led to banking activities.
As a result of its success, the city has had to expand eastwards along the Thames.
When Canary Wharf was first conceived in the sort of late 1980s, I suppose, it was thought that all the tall buildings would go there and that the future of the city was more or less preserved. And for a while, the tall buildings did go into Canary Wharf, and they still are doing, but not everyone wants to base their business in Canary Wharf. Some organisations prefer to be in the square mile, traditionally where deals have been done.
Canary Wharf represents the application of new communication systems and new technologies, but the financial centre remains the same.
The capital continues to grow, to regenerate itself, always to the east. The Thames docklands have been redeveloped. London is constantly reinventing itself. From the Millennium Dome to the offices of architect Norman Foster, London is an architectural laboratory that influences the whole world. This is where the great architect's designs are conceived. The giant buildings he constructs all over the world bear his trademark high-tech style. It was Norman Foster who designed the new 90,000-seat Wembley Stadium, as well as London's City Hall. He also co-designed the Millennium Bridge. London's landscape is constantly changing. The most striking thing is its disparate nature. Originality is given free rein. The city develops rather empirically, district by district, seeking to rid itself of constraints. It mirrors differences, and nothing can thwart its capacity to innovate. Growing traffic problems demanded a solution that was somewhat innovative. Congestion charges were introduced in 2003 for vehicles entering the city centre. John Mason, Director of the Department of Transport.
Congestion charging was seen as a solution to a real problem that London suffered from chronic congestion before congestion charging was introduced. Building new roads in central London certainly wasn't an option, and so we had to look at a radical alternative and introduce a scheme that would make people really think about whether they needed to use their vehicles and bring their vehicles into central London.
The payment system is applied during the day. It's simple to operate thanks to the use of sophisticated technology.
Basically every single entry point into the central zone is covered by a camera, and that camera uses automated number plate recognition software, a bit like optical character recognition software used on a standard PC. And the vehicle number plates, the license plates of every vehicle that enter or leave the central zone are read by the cameras and the number plate systems.
The system is so efficient that other cities have taken it up. Cameras are now part of the urban landscape.
Obviously, with a scheme of this size, it does require a significant number of cameras to be put in place. But we used innovative ways to make the camera poles and the network blend into the general appearance on street. So generally, people don't actually know where the camera sites are.
Camera or street light? Who knows? Have you noticed all these cameras around you?
No, I've not seen them before.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Most likely, yeah.
Yeah, I knew about the cameras.
Yeah, no, I never noticed them.
No.
Didn't notice, no.
No.
I've never seen them before, and you come here every day.
Yes, the cameras are discreet, but doesn't it bother you being filmed?
Not too much, actually.
Not particularly.
No, not really, no. No, I feel safer as a result.
That looks like rather excessive, but I think they do have a lot of street crime around the station, so maybe that's helpful for that reason. Not because I don't know that they've been there, so it hasn't bothered me, no.
It does bother me because I like to know, you like to know if there's cameras and things around.
No, not at all. I think that it keeps you a lot safer.
I wish they used more CCTV evidence in criminal prosecutions.
If you're not doing anything wrong, then you have nothing to hide.
I'm a magistrate, and it would help us if we were able to see evidence of theft.
Was I doing anything wrong here?
Yes, I think it's fantastic thing the camera is here. We need it in London.
Yes, in London, eyes are watching you. Everywhere. London taxis, black cabs, are a much older and more visible institution than the cameras. Known for their courtesy and professionalism, drivers have to undergo a long period of training. Michael Conlon.
As you can see, this gentleman on his motorcycle to the right here, he will be studying the knowledge for at least 3 years. And he's got what is called his Blue Book runs on the front of his motorcycle.
This marathon preparation, though, focused on the city centre, is the easy part of the exam.
Believe me, after completing the knowledge of London, learning everything in London, and having only 6 weeks to learn the whole of the suburbs, it is very hard.
A legacy of the 19th century, little green wooden huts are part of the scenery in some London streets. No, they're not potting sheds. They're actually historical monuments, and part of the traditional world of the taxi driver.
It's a shower, taxi shower.
They're throughout London for London taxi drivers. It's stop, have a cup of tea, something to eat. It's a food hut.
Cabbie shelters have always been open all the year round.
Well, you're only taxi driver if you eat in. But you can purchase something, but you can't eat it in there. See at the back there, they've got like a couple of benches and that.
The rules forbid any gambling, alcohol, or swearing.
It's where taxi drivers can come and have refreshments and something to eat and have a little rest. Hello.
Of the 62 cabbie shelters originally built, 13 are still operating.
The taxi shelters were started back in 1875 by Lord Shaftesbury. And the reason why he started them was he sent one of his men servants out to get a taxi, and they actually died waiting for a cab.
Back then, it wasn't always easy to find a cab.
So they put up these shelters, and this is where people can come just to get a taxi or have something to eat. And at that time, most of the taxi drivers were drunk, so they used to come in here to have something to eat to stay sober.
As its name suggests, the black cab is usually black, of course. But London taxis sometimes flaunt extravagant colours.
I'd say that in the last, say, 15 to 20 years, advertising has moved into the taxi market. Personally, I prefer the traditional London taxi. I have had advertising once on my cab, but to be honest, I don't think I'd go for it again. You tend to advertise other countries, or certainly investment banks within the city, but I prefer, personally, the traditional black London cab.
The bodywork may have kept its retro style, but the interior has been modernised. New technologies have been introduced, although the sole manufacturer of London taxis hasn't changed. London taxis truly are an institution.
And off to our right, you can see Buckingham Palace at the moment, and believe it or not, even Prince Philip has his own London taxi.
Another means of transport, another London icon, the red double-decker bus. But the most widely used form of transport in the city is still the Underground. The London Underground is one of the oldest in the world, and its name suits it well, the Tube. Over 3 million passengers take it every day. Although the subterranean network is old, it is being given a facelift for the 2012 Olympic Games. Some stations have even benefited from the know-how of the masters of contemporary British architecture. For a city as densely populated as London, an efficient public transport system is vital. But efficiency does not preclude conviviality, nor respect for the masterpieces of the past. St Pancras Station is a remarkable edifice from the Victorian era. Its renovation, ready to welcome high-speed trains from the continent, is further evidence of the respect London has for its past. As a waterway, the Thames has always been used for both trade and leisure purposes. Latter-day river taxis mean the city can be crossed from east to west. The launches have their own landing stages and are now very much part of the city's public transport system. Night falls on London. The city snatches a few minutes' rest before the show begins. A change of tempo is imminent. The streets light up. You don't know which way to turn. As it does every evening, London becomes a mirror of lights. The capital flaunts its assets and gets dolled up, ready for a good time. The sobriety of the Victorian buildings fails to hide a taste for eccentricity. Everyday lights or Christmas lights? It's hard to tell. And anyway, who cares? Moths are drawn to anything that shines. The vortex in this mecca of nightlife just sucks you in. Piccadilly Circus explodes into life. Soho is a paradise for night revelers. There's something here for everyone. Bars, restaurants, theatres, cabarets, nightclubs and other pleasure spots set the scene. Let the show begin, or should we say shows, because London's theatre is not only musicals. London awakes with a fuzzy head. But gets straight back to work. Outside the modern buildings, traditional markets come to life. Thanks to the inventiveness of architects, they have been successfully assimilated into the 21st century capital, managing to maintain their human interest. Spitalfields Market almost vanished beneath the bulldozers, but has re-established itself in a renovated market hall. The steel and glass structure is reminiscent of the modern buildings in the nearby city. Another entertainment venue, another market. This time it's Covent Garden, which has also undergone a major facelift. The Great Market dates back to the early 20th century. The old site became trendy when it made way for fashionable clothes shops. For young designers, it's a shop window that's perfectly in keeping with their imagination. Everyone comes here to create their own look.
Let's watch the replay. Let's watch the replay.
This breeding ground for young talent kicked off the shackles of old influences and now fuels London's creative dynamism. London is now one of the great capitals of world fashion. Twice a year, a string of shows are held here. London has become a springboard for young designers, rivaling New York, Paris and Milan.
The show was great though. Yeah. We just say they forgot. I can't believe they did that though.
Far from the preoccupations of the jet set, quality of life for Londoners is encouraged in the rural side of certain markets. At Columbia Road Flower Market, tradition is cultivated with a dash of good humour. Every neighbourhood has its secret gardens. In the well-to-do western part of the city, just off the main thoroughfares, may be found a series of mews. Away from the gaze of prying eyes, these narrow streets were once lined by stables, now converted into charming houses swathed in greenery. The paving stones remain, and you might even run into a blacksmith. Yes, this is 20th century London. Is London the world's quality of life capital? The old stables are low-rise houses, often painted in bright colours. Balconies, roofs and entrances could be mistaken for flower markets. Another improbable oasis in the heart of the city is Little Venice, built along the London to Birmingham Canal in the late 19th century. Commercial traffic has given way to pleasure barges, designed to sail serenely along the calm waters of the canal. Towpaths have been fixed up for use by walkers. In London, parks account for 10% of the city's total surface area. They are immense. To the west, Hyde Park gives way to Kensington Gardens. And outside the Royal Palace, visitors can take full advantage of the lawns without a dissenting word. Yes, the public is allowed full access to the grass. Even works of art come to stretch out on it, in their own particular way. You may feed the ducks, or encounter other creatures. So much do the British love their gardening that in London, where space is at a premium, rooftops are sometimes converted into gardens. Real hanging gardens, 30 or so meters above a bustling street. To produce a garden in the English style, no accessory should be overlooked. One must show some imagination. So why not pink flamingos? Heading west from the centre towards Heathrow Airport, it's easy to completely forget the big city. In a shaft of sunlight, a sudden apparition. A herd of deer. You rub your eyes. We're in Richmond Park. Less than half an hour from the centre of London by car, doe and stag enjoy a peaceful existence in complete freedom, indifferent to the vehicles of their admirers. The close proximity of nature gives Londoners the opportunity to indulge in their favourite pastimes. Some are not untypical. Others are less well known. In London, three words keep springing to mind: freedom, creativity, diversity. The succession of ethnic festivals celebrated throughout the year illustrates perfectly the diversity. The Chinese New Year is welcomed in with as much enthusiasm as in Beijing or Singapore. A Cuban carnival was created to promote Cuban culture, notably dance and music, while remaining strictly non-political. Yes, this is Cuba in London. The Caribbean spirit explodes with exuberance for a whole day. Carnival is a European invention. It crossed the ocean and spread across America and the Caribbean. Its deepest roots are to be found most notably in Santiago, Cuba. Cultural mirror, London reflects all kinds of music, wherever it comes from. Invented by the French, La Fête de la Musique is now celebrated in the British capital too. As in France, the music is free all day long on every street corner in South Kensington, London's French Quarter. South Ken was created in the latter part of the 19th century. It's an urban village, dominated by the impressive Natural History Museum. Opposite the museum, a whole block of buildings is the property of the French government, including all of France's main public services and institutions. French presence in the area dates back to the early 20th century, when the first French school was built there. The establishment's buildings were used as a refuge by General Charles de Gaulle during World War II. Since then, the French have reconstructed a little corner of France here. Robert Zeg is a bookseller.
The French around here are nicknamed frogs, so the area became known as the Frog Valley.
Frog Valley has enabled the English to familiarize themselves with specialities from the continent.
Little by little, the more adventurous settled here and began to open small shops, restaurants, hair salons, manicurists, things like that. What wasn't here before, and what I find interesting, is that the English around here put French names on their stores to give them a certain allure, and they found that pretty funny.
Around London, the French are not the only ones, not by a long way, to have left their mark on a neighborhood.
What's so wonderful about London is its little villages. You have these Indian villages, Pakistani villages, Korean, Japanese, Chinese, German and Arabic villages, all with their own shops. So whatever you're looking for, you can find it.
Yes, in London, everyone can find their bearings. Notting Hill never fails to surprise with its large, white houses alongside little, brightly coloured facades that conjure up the Caribbean. One of the symbols of Notting Hill is the Portobello Road Market. Antique hunters gather here every Saturday. The market is crammed with treasures of all kinds, trinkets, decorations and accessories. The word village has always been associated with Chelsea, one of London's most select neighbourhoods. The charm of the area has attracted artists for a long time. Chelsea is both surprising and disorienting, as is the case with the King's Road, the main drag running through it. Luxury shops have long since replaced the Chelsea avant-garde storefronts of the 1970s. The King's Road has settled down. It's now very stylish, parading luxury cars and large four-wheel drive vehicles, nicknamed Chelsea tractors. Chelsea Harbour, once used for unloading coal, is now a marina. The Thames provides plenty of surprises. On the bridge is the beach. Every year, the river is celebrated. Who would have thought that sandcastles could be made in the middle of London? Or that the Thames is home to a variety of odd fish.
The budgie man. Let's go. Come on, you budgie lovers. Had a little budgie. The budgeriga. We come down to London, performed in Leicester Square. Geordie and the budgie, when not looking pale, budgeriga. You made me a star.
Absolutely perfect. Well done.
Today, the banks of the Thames have been transformed into a dance floor. The river becomes a meeting place. Every Sunday morning on the outskirts of Hyde Park, Speaker's Corner is a forum for opinions of every kind. As long as they have a voice that carries, anyone can express and defend their political or religious ideas.
Moses gave us this book.
A mirror of democracy since the late 19th century, Speaker's Corner is a place where famous orators such as Karl Marx or Lenin have expressed their views. Holding forth to a crowd requires a certain skill. Accessories are important if you're going to make yourself heard.
What gives you joy, money cannot buy. Don't talk about what you don't know. They want to
Some find their audience. The fight for freedom of speech involves all manner of artistic expression. In London, even power stations can become works of art. Now a listed building, Battersea Power Station may well turn out to be a point of reference for London art. Like another power station turned into a museum of contemporary art, the Tate Modern. Manufacturing defect or work of art? One is apt to wonder. The vast structure of the engine room has been converted into an exhibition space that the old Tate could never have provided. Curator Tanya Barson explains.
Tate Modern opened in the year 2000. It's a building that was designed by Herzog and de Meuron, Swiss architects, and it was London's first museum dedicated to modern and contemporary art.
British artists are exhibited alongside international artists in vast halls that seem tailor-made for the purpose. Between the permanent and temporary exhibitions, every movement and school is represented.
Well, at Tate, we try to embrace the full spectrum of contemporary practice, so all kinds of art are shown here, from installation art, sculpture and painting to film and video, photography, in fact, also performance and live art. So every form of contemporary art is really encompassed by what we do here at Tate.
With the Tate, London is confirmed as one of the very best centres of art anywhere in the world.
I think in many respects London has become the or one of the international centres for contemporary art in the world. It was during the 1990s that London drew attention from the international art world.
The London art scene continues to become more diverse. Galleries are springing up all over the city. The dynamism of the London art market is supported by both the museums and the private sector. Sarah Jameson runs a gallery.
There are major museums and collectors here who really ushered in this new movement for contemporary art.
Some galleries are booming, such as these, dedicated particularly to photography.
I think photography has really come into its own within the contemporary art world. It is highly sought after now. There is quite an active market in both London and all the other art centres in the world.
The Thames reflects London. On the one hand, there's a respect for tradition. On the other, modernism and the search for new directions. London always surprises.